And we are back. Thank you very much for joining us. What an inspiring session we had with the opening addresses from the high-level speakers and renowned innovators. It was really an amazing discussion, and we were really glad to have also with us representatives of the European Parliament and also the words from the European Commission, given that the Creative Flip is actually a European pilot project co-funded by the European Union and coordinated by European Commission, DG Education and Culture. The opening session really gave us a really good introduction for the 2 days of the conference. And also this session as well, called Creative Flip, a contribution in the search of a healthy ecosystem for culture and creative sectors and industries, will also give a stock taking of what Flip has done in the past 2.5 years. Why did we even do these things? So what were the main challenges that the project wanted to tackle, and how we contributed to addressing these issues? Over the last 2.5 years, our consortium, consisting of 6 members, has done a lot of work. We organized a lot of conferences. We've organized lots of workshops and focus groups, held surveys, interviews, and lots of research. And we are really glad to be able to present to you now the results of all our hard work. But before we go into actually presenting the work package by work package, we would like to give you a very brief overview of what Flip has been doing in short 2 minutes. So we would like to see the video if we can. Thank you. We hope you enjoyed the short video. It was actually really hard to narrow down the selection of all the photos and images we wanted to use. I hope some of you recognize their faces in there from the previous events that we've held. It was really nice to see them all again. And now after this, it's my pleasure to actually go introducing my partners from the Creative Flip team. And together here in the studio with me is my colleague Isabelle del Voldere from Idea Consult. Her team has been working very hard on the topic, which is of very high interest and also very high importance for the cultural creative sector. It's the topic of finance and access to finance for cultural and creative industries. So Isabelle, could you please tell us what are the systemic problems existing in the CCSI ecosystem when it comes to access to finance for culture and creative sector? And which problems did Flip try to tackle, and how did you try to tackle them?
Dubravka, I'm very happy to be here in the studio. Well, to come back to your questions, when it comes to the systemic problems still out there, when it comes to finance, we have to say that in the last decade, a lot of things have happened. If you can go to the next slide, please. Yes, thanks. So in the last decade, a lot of efforts have already been made to improve access to finance, and definitely made progress, both on the regulatory side, on European Commission taking measures, but also a lot of interesting developments in the financing landscape itself. So why still a finance workshop? There's still a lot of fragmentation in the financial landscape. Also, the connection between financiers and cultural and creative actors and ventures is still difficult. Also, a lack of overview and looking at accessing finance from a more holistic perspective, and also from the values, the purpose-driven perspective on finance is something that was still missing, and there's still a lot of work to be done there. So that's what we actually wanted to contribute to in Creative Flip. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see, for instance, so our aim was to indeed contribute by supporting the advancement of a healthier and a more sustainable financing ecosystem. And what do we mean by that? As you see from the picture there, there are actually 4 pillars, according to us, when talking about a financing ecosystem that is healthy. And those 4 pillars, they need to be in balance and integrated, so not isolated from one another. The first pillar is, of course, is there a sufficiently diverse financing landscape? Are there financial instruments that serve the needs of the many different ventures and cultural and creative actors active in the sector? But it's also about capacity building. Is there sufficient financial literacy within the sector? But also, is there sufficient cultural and creative sectors literacy on the financier side, which is also often lacking? A third pillar is about the information and matching. Where can information be found and accessed on finances, on funding? It's very fragmented currently. And how also can cultural and creative actors be supported with advice on combining all these different financing instruments? Because what we see from research is that for most actors, it's about finding a good combination and building up a strong financing mix, and that's very challenging. And then, of course, the fourth pillar is about policies. Which policies effectively improve access to finance? And that's where we wanted to contribute with Creative Flip in further supporting the development of such an ecosystem. And when you go to the next slide, the things that we wanted to focus on specifically is really crossing the silos between those different pillars, pillars that have shown developments over the years in each of the pillars, but it's often about combining those perspectives, broadening the perspectives of policymakers towards the sector, of financiers towards policymakers towards the sector, developing such a common language and finding strong solutions that serve the sector and the ecosystem as a whole. And what we also did in the project is really also focusing on sharing good practices to inspire each of those stakeholders. Yeah, thank you. So what we did, a lot of bringing people together indeed in focus groups, workshops. We launched a survey specifically for policymakers to share practices, to share their experiences with developing good policies. Then, of course, in January last year, before COVID-19 was there, we had a great gathering here in Brussels to share first insights, to also share our first ideas for developing tools that that could help in this process. Now, then we all know that COVID-19 was then there, and we of course had to switch our methods, the methods of bringing stakeholders together and the exchanges, and we all know by now the Zoom sessions and so on. But we also changed a bit our working program to really also see where we can help policymakers in inspiring them and in exchanging how policymakers across Europe have dealt with this, this all of a sudden this enormous problem that hits the sector really hard. A lot of measures have been taken in the first place, emergency measures, and so we did research on that, and now actually we're also still in the process of finalizing a second research that we have done that really focuses now on relaunch measures and looking into innovative relaunch measures that have been taken across Europe and sharing those among policymakers. Now, this all resulted in project outputs. You see already a number of publications that you find online, the proceedings of the conference that I mentioned. But what we really want to stress today, and which that have been published also today, is the development of the guide, what we call the So You Need Money guide. That we will happily present in much more detail tomorrow during a workshop, and where we have developed models and a guidebook to guide both financiers and culture and creative actors that have financial questions to guide them through what we call the financing jungle. And then a second tool that we have developed and that we will also present to you in much more detail during a workshop tomorrow is the serious game, Flip to Act, we call it. It's a collaborative game that really wants to trigger the conversation between financiers, policymakers, culture and creative actors on finding good solutions to strengthen the ecosystem. And then finally, as I mentioned, the work that we are currently still doing on relaunch measures for the culture and creative sectors, focusing specifically on building better with innovation, is another work. The report itself, you'll still have to wait a bit for that. It will be published in the course of July, but already today, during our conversation, you'll hear first results of it. I think that's in a nutshell what we have done in the work around finance.
Thank you very much, Isabelle. That was really a very quick overview of so many things that have been done. But that's why we invite all the participants who are interested in learning more about this to join us in the 2 panel sessions, which will take place later today. And also tomorrow for the parallel workshop, which will deal with 2 of the outputs and toolkits and guides that have been produced within this work package. So it's my great pleasure now to continue to our work package on learning, the L in FLIP, and to introduce to you Pierre Hausemer from VVA, Economics and Policy. Hello, Pierre.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
Glad to have you with us. Yes. So, Pierre, your work package, and specifically the work that VVA has been doing in the context of FLIP, is dealing with existing problems in the CCA ecosystem when it comes to skills, and specifically skills mismatches between the needs and what are the gaps that are existing. So could you tell us a little bit about this? What has your research been about, and what are the challenges that you've identified?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks very much for introducing me. So the objectives of our part of the work was to put the development of culture and creative skills for the CCSI in a European context, and then also to do an analysis of what the skills mismatches, skills gaps within the CCSI really are, and then so trying to find ways of identifying these skills gaps, and then also, of course, looking a bit forward to see how these can be addressed. And in order to do that, we did research just like Isabelle was presenting for her part of the work. We did research that combined lots of different kinds of methods, including interviews, focus groups, workshops, but also desk research, of course, looking at a wide range of publications. And we did that because of the heterogeneous nature of the CCSI. We, in order to come to conclusions that were valid and that were robust, we had to focus our research on a number of subsectors within the CCSI, and then also not just subsectors, but also professions, occupations within those subsectors. And so what we mostly focused on were three big subsectors, so the design and creative services sector, and within which we looked at the professions of advertising manager, digital games designer, and fine arts instructor in more detail. We also looked at the subsector of visual arts and crafts, and here we looked at clothing CAD technician, goldsmiths, and costume makers, so very specific professions again in more detail. And then we also analyzed the performance and celebration sector, and here we looked at singers, actors, actresses, and violin makers. So as you can see, just from that selection, it is a very, very heterogeneous range of sectors. And this deep dive onto these specific occupations and specific subsectors within it allowed us to come to conclusions that we then try to extrapolate from and come to some wider recommendations too. In terms of geographies, as we all know, the CCSI are also very much a place-based activity. And so we also focused on a number of geographies. We covered 9 countries in detail, so Bulgaria, Czech Republic, Finland, France, Germany, Poland, Slovenia, Spain, and then also the United Kingdom. Although the United Kingdom is not an EU member any longer, but we still looked at the UK because of the strength of its CCSI sector. So we did this research across these countries and across these subsectors, and again with the objective of trying to identify skills mismatches and ways of overcoming those. And in terms of the key findings, so on the next slide, in terms of the key findings, so I only put a very small number of key findings on this slide, but basically the first key finding is that COVID-19, of course, has brought to the fore structural skills challenges that were always there, but that have been now exacerbated by COVID and that have now become more evident as a result of COVID. In particular, as we all know, the CCSI have suffered specifically from the pandemic, although it is one of the fastest growing sectors in the global economy before the pandemic. A lot of output was lost. 31% of revenues in 2020 was lost across the CCSI to the COVID pandemic. And this affected, of course, the 7.6 million people across the EU who are employed in this sector. And what came to the fore there, specifically related to skills, is that there are mismatches between the skills that the workforce within the CCSI have or are developing and the needs of the labor market. And this is really where we focus much of our research on. And these skills mismatches can be categorized across a number of different types. There's, of course, the technical, artistic, creative skills. Of course, we have a very strong creative tradition across Europe. But in terms of the technical skills and artistic skills, there's also a need to develop these further and match them better with the needs of the labor market. And this can include stage and lighting design, engineering, but also gallery management, curatorship, and many others. But also in terms of technical skills, we would also put there the digital skills that are needed to a greater and greater extent. Soft skills are also one of the elements where there are some skills mismatches, and these includes things like teamwork, communication, interpersonal skills, and so on. And then one big area where we identified a room for improvement, let's put it this way, relates to leadership and entrepreneurial skills. And I think this was also ties very well with what was said in the previous session around innovation. These leadership and entrepreneurial skills cover areas such as fundraising, marketing, project management, networking, and advocacy, and they are very closely linked to turning the activity, the creative activity of the CCSI into something that is commercially viable and therefore can sustain itself over a longer time period. And here we saw room for improvement in terms of making that transition from the educational institutions, which often convey a very strong technical and creative knowledge to people, to students, into the labor market, where then suddenly these creative professionals have to survive also economically and be innovative, adopting new technologies and making them part of their business models. And then, if you want me to go to the next slide, in terms of what we the conclusions that we drew from this, the report concludes that there's a need. You cannot address these skills mismatches just by some small scale ad hoc interventions, but rather what is needed is a much more multifaceted approach for addressing the skills mismatches that covers all of the different elements that are at play. So that includes regulation, it includes education, it includes knowledge, and it includes funding. And these four all need to come together into, as you can see on the next slide, an ecosystems strategy for the CCSI that really builds on that tries to address all of these skills mismatches at the same time. And in particular, what is important in that ecosystem strategy is, first of all, to see the CCSI as one ecosystem. So not just as a set of professions and subsectors that are operating in silos, but to see them as one big ecosystem. And the Commission has done us a great favor, and by actually doing that, by defining the CCSI as one of the 14 ecosystems that are the focus of EU activity going forward. One of the key elements in here to try to address all four of these areas of intervention at the same time is to work differently with stakeholders. So what we call knowledge brokers in our report, policymakers need to try and build up, and then also mobilize knowledge brokers within the CCSI to gather information, understand what the skills needs are between the labor market, and then also exchange information with the educational institution and engage in a dialogue with them to ensure that there's a better fit. Secondly, in terms of developing skills strategies for the CCSI, which is one of the important aspects that can improve the situation, the building up and use of umbrella organizations at the professional level, so for each of the professions, is important. And then also tying these into the knowledge and innovation communities that were also mentioned in the previous session. The third element of recommendation that we looked at was the formalization of career paths for professions within the CCSI across all of the EU member states, and then also a greater exchange between the education institution and the labor market, not just while someone is a student, but also from a lifelong learning perspective. So, and also going both ways, both from the students to the labor market, but also from businesses to educational institution, where, for instance, professionals can act as teachers in educational institutions. So a sort of Erasmus plus, if you will, around the CCSI between the educational and labor market institutions. And then the last point that we found relates specifically to funding, and that is what we noticed. And I think this is not something that we just noticed in our work package, but also across the creative flip, that there is a need for a real impact narrative for the CCSI that shows what the impact of the CCSI are. I mentioned some statistics at the beginning of my speech here, But these statistics are not very well known. The importance, economic also importance of the CCSI for Europe, and using this impact narrative that covers a range of professions and sectors within the CCSI, and using it to mobilize funds at different levels. Of course, I mentioned before that CCSI are very place-based, and so funding models can be local, place-based for specific occupations where the impact, where the activity is developed at the local level. But then at the European level, so far removed from the local, there's also a need for skills, innovation, entrepreneurship platforms to help develop those skills and address those skills needs that I mentioned in the previous slides. So these are just a very quick summary of what we found. Of course, tomorrow we will have a panel dedicated to skills in this workshop, in this conference, and so I hope to be able to tell everybody more about this tomorrow as
well. The topic of skills of the future is actually really currently interesting on the EU level, as we said, with new EU Pact for Skills, and also especially with the group forming for cultural and creative sectors and industries. And it's really great that tomorrow we will have a panel devoted to these topics specifically, with also representatives of the sector, but also representatives of the European Commission, DG Employment, and CEDEFOP. And we really invite you to join us tomorrow as well for this panel discussion. But we stay on this topic with actually another panelist who will join tomorrow for this session. It is our colleague, Claudia Plaimauer from 3S, joining us from Vienna. Hello, Claudia.
Hello.
Hello. So we're staying with the topic of skills and work package on learning. And on your side, you have worked extensively on the analysis of existing tools on EU level, such as ESCO and EU forecasting tools, and how they were actually adapted or not for the cultural and creative sector. So could you let us know what challenges have you identified when it comes to better use and adaptation of these tools for the sector?
Yes, please switch to the next slide. There are three very specific challenges we identified. First of all, if you want to find information on the CCSI in these European tools, you really have to make an effort. Let's say if you want to find occupations of relevance to fine arts in ESCO, or if you want to learn something about current skills demand in cultural education from CEDEFOP's European Online Vacancy Analysis tool. The visibility of the CCSI in these tools, unfortunately, is rather low. Why is this so? The international classifications used for recording information on employment, ISCO and NACE, they don't contain the CCSI as a distinct unit of analysis. Information on the cultural creative sector can be found all over these classifications. Sometimes it is immersed in units containing also non-cultural content. The same applies to ESCO. There is no single heading summarizing cultural creative content. There is no highlighting of relevant information in units containing also non-cultural content. Another reason for the bad visibility of the sector is that for identifying cultural employment comprehensively, you have to combine information on the practiced occupation, which is recorded in ISCO, with information on the economic sector recorded in NACE. The Eurostat framework for cultural statistics specifies for the CCSI as a whole which parts of ISCO and NACE are relevant. Yet even if both are recorded at the highest level of detail available in these classifications, and now we come to the second challenge, you still cannot clearly distinguish cultural from non-cultural information in all cases. This has serious implications. For some cultural creative activities and occupations, you currently cannot generate employment data because relevant information cannot be distinguished from irrelevant one in ISCO. For example, arts teachers. They pop up in the ISCO groups, university and higher education teachers, in vocational education teachers, in secondary education teachers, and so on. So they are mixed with a lot of non-relevant content. The second implication, CCSI put high demands on data collection. You need a high level of detail. ISCO and NACE at 4-digit level need to be recorded. And you have to combine information on practiced occupation with the economic sector of activity to capture the whole of CCI comprehensively. Now, if some member states do not collect their national information at the required level of detail, then you also do not have harmonized data for the whole of Europe at the required level of detail, because you have to orient yourself at the smallest common denominator. But then if harmonized data covering all member states is not available at a sufficient level of detail, then also European tools like European forecasting or monitoring tools cannot make detailed predictions either. The CEDEFOP skills forecast currently work at 1 and 2-digit level of ISCO and NACE, and at that level you cannot identify any information on the cultural creative sector, unfortunately. And there's a third challenge. CCSI specific frameworks like the one by Eurostat or the Creative Europe sector definition, they are not fully interoperable with international classifications like ISCO, ESCO, or NACE. The Eurostat framework identifies relevant ISCO and NACE groups for the whole sector, but doesn't relate these to individual domains. So currently aggregations at the level of, for example, arts craft, heritage, or performing arts are impossible to make.
And thank you, Claudia. Mm-hmm. Could I ask you to maybe address now the recommendations on how you propose to improve?
Certainly. Next slide, please. In Creative Flip, we have taken a first step already in resolving some of these challenges. We have drafted for the 3 domains that Pierre has mentioned already, a breakdown. Actually, I wanted to stay with this one. A breakdown into ISCO unit groups and identify relevant ESCO occupations, and thus refine the Eurostat framework for cultural statistics. We will revise and continue this work within a follow-up project of FLIP. Once completed, this should also improve the interoperability between the Eurostat framework of cultural statistics and ISCO and NACE. Within ISCO, you should then be able to clearly distinguish cultural from non-cultural content in all cases, because partly cultural groups could be broken down into fully cultural ESCO occupations. You would then also be able to link all cultural domains with relevant ISCO unit groups and ESCO occupations. So you will then be able to answer questions like which cultural creative occupations does ESCO contain for the performing arts sector? You can then also, of course, use the amended framework for summarizing data at more levels of detail than currently possible, also at the level of domains, for example. And you can exploit the framework for presenting information, for example, of European forecasting on platforms. Now you don't have a single entrance point into the sector, branching up into domains, for example, to access information. Once this refinement of the framework has been completed, it could be exploited for such purposes as well, and thus make the whole sector more visible and also more accessible.
Claudia, since we're running a little bit out of time, I invite all of those who are interested in learning more about this topic and your research, and actually in engaging in a debate with the representatives of the European Commission, CDFOP, also to join us tomorrow for the panel discussion on this topic. Thank you very much, Claudia. And now we move to our work package on innovation, and it's my pleasure to greet my colleague Chryssa Vlachopoulou from Athens, from the European Creative Hubs Network. Hello, Chryssa. Hi.
Hello, Dubravka. Thank you. So yes, in work package 3, innovation work package, we dealt with the issue of transversal and creative skills and the problem of their insufficient inclusion into skills development programs and curricula. We aim to explore innovative ways of knowledge exchange between creative hubs, but also between creative hubs and educational institutions. Could we move to the next slide, please? Specifically through the implementation of the peer-to-peer exchange program. The program was aimed to creative hubs. We aimed to enhance knowledge exchange between the creative and cultural sectors and discover innovative ways of skills development. We had the chance to have 2 rounds of peer-to-peer exchanges between creative hubs teams. And more specifically, we had 24 exchanges, physical and virtual, in the light of the pandemic. We will also invite you to join the session tomorrow and learn more about the positive outcomes of the program and the peer-to-peer toolkit that that gathers all the knowledge from the program. Also, we were very happy to launch the Ambassadors of Change program that occurred from the pandemic. It was inspired by the Creatives Unite platform, and it is a program that gathers initiatives that occurred from the crisis to tackle the challenges that the crisis brought. These initiatives are showcased through a dedicated platform and are made available to interested peers from one-on-one sessions and also for more information. Also in the parallel sessions tomorrow, we are going to be having a dedicated sessions to the Ambassadors of Change. Back to you, Dubravka.
Together with the ECHN, the Goethe-Institut has also worked a lot in this work package, which we can say is one of the more practical ones within the project, where we had a lot of pilot initiatives such as the peer-to-peer exchange, but also the Learning Labs program. If we could go to the next slide. So the Learning Labs program was actually an opportunity for us as the project to support cross-sectoral cooperation between creative hubs and various types of formal and non-formal educational institutions. The idea and the aim of this program was to test new innovative ways of introducing creative skills development in the educational system. Next slide. So we have managed to fund 15 projects, 15 creative hubs who established partnerships with schools and universities all across Europe. As you can see on the map we have here, these are the hubs which have participated in our program. And it was really a wonderful program with lots of wonderful output. We invite you to visit the Creative Flip webpage and see actually all the videos and photographs and really short summaries from the project. If you could just go back shortly. And as the outcomes of this program, we are publishing guidelines for creative partnerships. But tomorrow, during our session on cross-sectoral cooperation, starting tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, you will hear more about this program and also see little videos and examples from some of the learning labs. So back to you, Chryssa.
Could we move to the next slide, please? We are also very proud of the Creatives Unite platform that was born in response to the crisis and the pandemic, and the need to gather in one place all the information and initiatives that came from the creative and cultural sector. The platform is interactive. It welcomes contributions from all creative initiatives. And it was born after a proposal of Commissioner Maria Gabriel in May 2020. We are now counting 1 year and 1 month of life for the platform. We have been counting over 39,000 users, and we host 939 posts according to our latest statistics. We will have the opportunity to talk a bit more on the Creatives Unite initiative tomorrow in the Flip in the Future session. Programmed at 3, where we will also have the opportunity to hear from some inspiring cases, such as the Renaissance Project from the European Theatre Convention and the Illuminate Cities presented by Domingo Abruzzi and Alexandra Payne. So we hope to see you all tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chryssa. I think we're all very proud of Creatives Unite and the support that the Creative Flip project has given to the sector by hosting this platform. And as Chryssa already noted, we invite you to visit our sessions tomorrow, the whole day, starting from the learning labs to peer-to-peer ambassadors of change, and finally with the Creatives Unite session. And now we go to our final work package on patenting, and it's my pleasure to greet my colleague Cyrille Dubois from the Intellectual Property Institute from Luxembourg. Hello, Cyrille.
Hello, Dubravka.
Hello, nice to have you with us. So in the context of Creative Flip, we have handled the topic of patenting, which stands for the P in Flip, the final letter. And this topic is, we could say, not so well known among the CCSI. Could you tell us a little bit about the work you've done on this topic over the last 2.5 years?
Sure. You're right, Dubravka. It is true that this topic, patenting, is not really usual or popular among the CCSIs. I would even generalize the issue and say that intellectual property in general is not always understood as it should be. There is indeed some misunderstanding about IP and confusion between the different types of protection and the different IP rights. However, IP is very important for the sector. I would even say it is core to this sector, because all CCSIs, all creatives, in fact, create intellectual property. IP is at the core of their activities, as IP protects the creations of the mind. It protects innovations, and that is very important. And the main elements of IP that is known in the sector is copyright. It is true that copyright covers a lot of the works developed by the creatives. However, it is not the only IP right that is relevant to the sector. All the other IP rights are relevant for the sector to a certain extent. For example, design is relevant for the protection of the appearance of products, their shape. Trademarks are relevant to protect the name under which products are sold on the market, and also to provide a recognition and distinctive signs among other products. So even if you would immediately think that patenting is not for CCIs, because patenting is about technical innovations, technical inventions, and that CCSIs relate more to artistic or literary creation. And it is also true that, in fact, patenting is not the top elements that is registered for the CCIs. CCIs are even not in the top 20th of the most patenting sector, but it does not mean that patenting is not relevant to the sectors. Companies from the sector can benefit, they can capture value from intellectual property and also from patenting that is part of IP. That's why we decided to analyze the patenting practices in the sector, and this through different angles. The first one was through a survey on the patenting practices in the sector. Then we also run a state-of-the-art of patenting practices, for which we looked for information over electronic databases and over the internet. And this state-of-the-art has been also enriched with patenting cases studies from European creatives to show that patenting is also relevant to this sector. We also had the statistical analysis of the patent applications in the sector, because as I've just said, there are patent applications that are filed in this sector. We then discussed these results with IP experts and experienced creatives during workshops that were organized during the conference Flipping the Odds, but also during dedicated online sessions that we had. So from this sector, could we move to the next slide, please? We concluded and had some recommendations that were drafted according to our studies. So our main findings are in fact that, not surprisingly, CCSIs are mainly users of technologies, and they are not developing technologies for the majority of people, of the members. But patents are little used in the sector. It is the least popular IP title. And the main subsectors that are using patents are media and content industries, architecture, and fashion. The most active countries, so those filing the most patent applications, are Germany, France, and Great Britain. And we also identified that CCSIs do not know how to use IP in general, and not only patents. So it's more broader issue that we faced, in fact, here. And there is a great need for more information, more training in the sector, as IP is anyway recognized as being important, but the actors of the sector do not know how to handle it. For purposes of illustration and with the help of creatives, and that I would warmly thank here, we have developed the case studies I mentioned just previously to show that it is possible and relevant to patent in this sector. And here are the case studies that we have included. And these are real case studies based on patents that are active, they are in force. And they provide some good examples on the use of patents in the sector, and they show it is possible and that patenting is also relevant. So not only trademark, design, or copyright, the mostly used IP rights in the sector, but patents is also relevant. Could we move to the next slide, please? Thank you. So from the previously mentioned analysis, together with these fruitful exchanges that I have mentioned with the experts, we have developed and set up a list of recommendations. The first one is to promote the awareness of IP and its value. And this could be done through several ways. So development of training programs, for example. The second recommendation is to link the innovation platform for the provision of support for IP management, building up networks around IP, connecting intermediaries to have exchanges on the best practices in the sector, etc. Harnessing the use of IP assets was our third recommendation. For example, through the development of a toolkit database for creative, the provision of information and training on the use of peer-to-peer on open source licenses, for example. Amplifying the voice of inspiration was is in fact our fourth recommendation. So we could showcase some success stories, further involve creatives in new information campaigns, for example. Recommendation 5 is triggering IP capacities, development of new projects for creatives on the use of IP. And there is this Flip3 project that will start soon, and that will also participate to this in a certain way. We could enhance the promotion, have a larger promotion of calls dedicated to creative as well. And then diversification of IP services. So the idea here would be to develop services that are specific to each of the subsectors. I would not enter into much details because we're running out of time. And all those recommendations and all of our work is available in a report that you can find on the project website. But I would finally would like to invite you to join this afternoon's session during which my colleague Honoré Meul, that is working with us on this activity, will talk more about the value of IP as a source of revenue for CCSIs. That's all from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Cyrille. And we are almost right on time. So thank you so much. And as you said, the actually very extensive and rich report in terms of on topic of patenting for CCSI is already available on our website. We invite you to go and have a look, as well as to join the later afternoon session on the topic of access to finance. Unfortunately, since we are out of time, we cannot address the questions on the Slido chat, but given that one of them refers to next steps for policymakers in order to improve access to finance, I really invite you to join us in this session starting at 3:30 this afternoon, where Isabelle will actually be present and where she will gladly answer this question for you, along with more information about the work that has been done in this work package. I would like to thank all my partners for joining us now and for giving the presentations of their work packages. And we will now go on a well-deserved lunch break. I think everyone is ready. And we invite you to come back at 2 o'clock when we will have the next panel session about moving towards the new normal. We're really happy to welcome really renowned names from the sector itself, but also from the member states and the European Commission, where we will discuss what are the lessons learned from the disruptions of the 2020-2021, what are the innovative practices that have been identified and can be replicated as good practice examples. So please take a short break now, and we see you back here at 2 o'clock in the afternoon CET time. Thank you.